Today, we have a new socially acceptable addiction, and it is technology. Every day, all around the world, children spend countless hours online, posting to social networks, online gaming, and even just watching videos. The more alarming part about this is that many of these children are receiving their own personal devices now as early as 6 or 7 years old. So when we overlay this excessive use of technology at these critical developmental periods of children's developing brains, it begs the question, could we potentially be creating a new generation of addicts? Let's take a look at the science. In this image, you see a healthy brain. That nice, robust red area is our dopamine receptors. In contrast, the brain of a drug addict. The dopamine receptors in this scan are significantly reduced. Now, most people still consider dopamine to be that neurochemical that makes us feel good. But scientists today understand that dopamine has more to do with motivation and reinforcement in our brain's reward center. You can kind of think of it as a do-it-again system rather than a feel-good system. An addict's brain is motivating them to do it again and again. So let's look at what it is to be a technology addict. The scan that we're going to see is a technology addict who has spent routinely 8 hours online, posting to social networks. As you can see in the scan, the background looks a little different because it's really recent science, but it's the same type of scan that's looking at those dopamine receptors. You can tell that they've been impacted. And when we compare them next to the healthy brain, the damage, obvious. When we compare the technology addict to the drug addict, the parallel in the damage occurring, indisputable. So what does this all mean for us? Well, we're all wired to seek reward. And the tech companies, they now understand how to tap into our primal drives. Companies have begun hiring neuroscientists and behaviorists to work along with their programmers to develop products that keep users hooked. It has gone beyond the goal of merely producing useful products to the point where they are actively seeking ways to keep us all endlessly connected. And if that corporate strategy sounds familiar, it's because it is. One comedian recently said, "Philip Morris only wanted your lungs. The App Store wants your soul." I think we can all agree that addiction is complicated. It involves a relationship between a chemical or a behavior in concert with genetics, learning, or the environment. Substance addiction is more easily understood because when we take something into our body, we can feel it make a difference. But with behavioral addictions, it's that much harder to identify because there's no substance, and consequently, that much harder to understand. When we're talking about addiction, what we're really talking about is our brain's struggle for control. If we're able to avoid the substance or the behavior when it's causing us problems, great, we have no addiction issue. But when we lose control and it starts to impact our relationships, our work, our school, our self-esteem, or even our emotional stability, then the vicious cycle of addiction begins. Microstructure abnormalities is a phrase that should stand out to all of us. There are hundreds of studies in development right now by scientists who are trying to find answers to provide us all guidance. Each of the studies is complex, but they're looking at minute regions of the brain and trying to help differentiate between a healthy brain and a brain of a technology addict. Here's the structure generally of a brain. On the outermost area, you can see that is our gray matter. It's primarily responsible for processing our information and our emotions. Housed deeper within the brain is our white matter. It's like the superhighway of our brain. It facilitates messages between the brain to make sure that we get our messages to the right place at the right time so we can act upon them. The scientific research on technology addiction has shown that we have a loss of gray matter in critical areas and a reduced density of white matter within the brain. Even more alarming are the areas of the brain that are being impacted have to do with motor control, cognition, and motivation, as well as areas that process our emotions, our decision-making, and our impulse control. Generally, the 24/7 access to technology is making us more impulsive, disconnected, anxious, and emotionally unregulated than ever. We know now that the more time that children spend online, the more isolated and depressed they become, and the more time they spend viewing carefully curated, digitally altered social media posts, the more inadequate and depressed they feel. You might be asking yourself, well, how depressed can kids really become? Well, one recent study that looked at 32 different hospitals between 2008 and 2015 found that their hospital admissions more than doubled for children aged 5 to 17 years old. The loss of human connection through face-to-face communication, eye contact, and touch is creating a future for our children in which they have the emotional intimacy, the compassion, and the empathy is disappearing. Our society is becoming more focused on the number of likes our post receives instead of on the human connection that like is supposed to represent. Remember these brain scans? I lose sleep over the unintentional damage to our children's brains under the misguided assumptions that technology overuse is totally harmless. Of course, we can't keep our children from technology, or it would put them at a severe disadvantage in a global economy that requires them to be proficient with it. But I am also acutely aware from my education that something as simple as a smartphone can actually structurally alter my daughter's brain and potentially trigger a lifetime of addiction. The world is going to evolve whether we like it or not, technology especially. And technology has undoubtedly been net positive. However, with all of this good comes some bad. The question for us moving forward is not whether we can figure out a way to have a balanced relationship with technology. It is how quickly we can get there, and what is that healthy, balanced relationship going to look like? I have spent my career learning and understanding and talking about the good and bad of technology. We can all step into the light together now because I have proof that that actually works. My team and I have been implementing a program where we've empowered kids and parents and educators with knowledge about healthy, balanced technology use. And the results? Children do, in fact, make better choices for themselves and for their friends when they're given the knowledge and the opportunity. Educating kids on how to be a good digital citizen at the same time as giving parents and educators the tools and the resources they needed in order to support these kids through some change, reduce the overall technology-related incidents by over 50%. It proves that when we trust our children with the emerging science, and when we talk to them about the educational and legal consequences that they're facing in every facet of their lives for the rest of their lives, it gives them good direction on how to make better choices in this digital world. I believe all children want to make good choices given the opportunity, but it's up to us in order to educate them on how to do this in this new world. Everything that we do online is public and permanent. So now that we all know this emerging science, how do we all come together to make a difference in this very real issue of technology addiction? The answer is simply awareness and education. Technology has enabled us to do so much good, but it is not totally without consequence. Pitfall was a really fun game to play as a kid, but it was essentially a stick figure running across the screen in maybe 4 colors. Today's games, apps, programs, much more sophisticated. And the programmers, as we've learned, highly skilled on our vulnerabilities. It is imperative that we come together and we address this issue boldly, honestly, and without fear. Thank you.